Welcome back to Because We Love You. This week we are talking about something I find really interesting that sounds a little nerdy, but it's called intellectual humility.
And the reason why we chose this was actually we alluded to it last week a little bit.
Yes.
And we got some feedback like, what is that? And how does that apply? And I think it was very interesting to people. So we were like, let's dive more into what this very smart sounding topic of intellectual humility. What is it? Do we have it? Can we get more of it? And so we're gonna talk about that today.
Yes.
Stacy, when you think about it, in the world puts things in extreme categories. So I was trying to think, and most of the time we believe right there in the middle. But what's something that is like so extreme that most people would say that's not really the best way to live? But
when I think of extremes, did you ever watch that show on Nat Geo called Doomsday Preppers?
I never watched it, because I'm not one of those, but I had
well,
heard
not
stories.
Either.
You watched it,
some
too?
of the stories, sometimes, right? Some of the stories are wild. So when you say extreme, I think of something like that, right? This idea of like people over preparing, saving all of the things, like dedicating large portions of their house or their whole house to a future that...
It's kind of crazy because like half the world was that during Y2K. Like
Y2K, that's a great example.
Like even though most people would agree that extremes are not good, but I mean my family even became, not me, I was still little then.
Yeah.
But like my mom and dad were like, well, it might be true. So we legit had like 6 months of water in our garage.
Wow.
And canned foods. Canned foods. Yeah. But then you have people who are in complete denial that there's anything you need to be prepared for.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Like the extreme of nothing bad could ever happen. Yeah. And I have to admit though, I lean more. I'm pulled more to, let's just go with
day
the flow.
By day. Don't worry about
okay.
it. What will
we'll
come
figure
will
it
come.
out. But those are two extremes that most would say, like, there's somewhere in the middle. Maybe we shouldn't store up 10 years worth of canned foods because there might be some people that are hungry now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Give that too.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, like, maybe you shouldn't have enough to eat for, like, one day in your pantry. Because, like, could you be prepared for 2 weeks, a month? That would be nice.
Reasonable. Yeah. And I think, we live in the middle of that, but kind of flip-flop back and forth. Yeah. I know you and I struggle with this, and we're constantly having conversations with our husbands about this. Like, we're going to save money this year. And then it's like, but also we would love to take this really fabulous vacation, right? So it's like, because we could die tomorrow. Let's go to Turks and Caicos. But then it's also like, well, our kids are going to be going to college someday. So we really should probably be saving and paying off our house.
I love that because, you're 6 on the Enneagram. So I know that your primary emotion is a little bit of anxiousness and maybe fear. Yeah. So like I play on that one. I want you to do something. But this may be our last year together, Stacy.
Wow, that's a little manipulative, I must say.
Well, you do. We all do this. We all, but it's only in your best. I only have your best interest at heart. Okay. It's a fun trip. Like if we don't take it this year, then would we ever? Like, oh, I love this. I'm feeling this. There's a quote and it says, and I don't know it word for word, but it's something like you can only seize the opportunity in the lifetime of the opportunity. So sometimes, you can miss confusing. An opportunity if the lifetime of the opportunity goes away. And so I'm all about seizing that opportunity with you. I'm not manipulating you. I'm helping you live your best life.
That helps you sleep at night. Yeah, that's great.
But that also, that goes. But there's extremes, and sometimes it is really hard to kind of see where the other person is coming from.
Yeah, because we all have this bias to think we're right. Like, of course, you hold beliefs, whatever it is that you think, that you feel, that you value. Like, you think that's the right thing, right? We don't go around holding all these beliefs that we know are wrong. So we think we're right, and whether that's extreme or not.
So how do you explain intellectual humility?
Okay. So here's, like, from the perspective of a psychologist, I think about it as Intellectual humility is the ability to understand or at least reflect on our cognitive limitations. So knowing that we don't know everything, knowing that we're fallible, that we make mistakes, that we have biases, that there's so much information in the world that we don't have, that we don't know, that there are experiences that we don't understand. So I think it's just starting with that recognition of understanding, that we have cognitive limits, and then just acknowledging that we could be wrong. So yes, most of us think we're right, and we should, I guess, right? Like, you should think what you believe is right. But we should also kind of hold on to that idea that we could be wrong about some things. There could be information out there.
Another perspective out there, and it just is not my perspective or how it shaped me. I love that, and I like that. And I think, though, coming from me, even though something like flags, and it's like, but is that becoming more me? Or is that not being confident? Because I want to be confident. I want to be viewed as confident. I want to be viewed as knowledgeable. Will I lose my leadership status if I'm constantly wanting to hear other people's opinions and ideas and maybe even change? So I know that people out there feel that way, but I think it's really, really important that, honestly, that this principle actually makes you a better leader.
For sure.
So, and it can make you more confident. And I want everybody to know that you don't lose, you can still be confident in the things that you do know and be willing to learn the things that you don't know.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a mix between those things. I don't think it's, being meek or, underconfident. Like, that's not the thing that we're talking about here. It's just being confident in what you know, especially in areas where you've done a lot of research and maybe you're even an expert, but always acknowledging that there's more you do not know.
And I think that even shows more confidence. Like, confidence in yourself as a person, in your brain. I'm confident enough to say, I don't know everything.
And that's
so I think that's really cool. I mean, this whole talk came out of some information by the Amazon creator CEO Jeff Bezos, and his whole idea was, he said those make better employees, people who are willing to adapt. And so that's why we're even talking about this. And when we were looking up some literature by Mark Leary, he kind of created some scales, like a scale to know. So if you're sitting out there, you're listening, you're running, you're doing all the things, and you're listening to our podcast right now, you may be thinking, do I have any intellectual humility?
And a lot of this work has come out of Mark Leary's lab. He is a social psychologist. He was at Wake Forest, so shout out to a Wake Forest grad here. And
thanks
now
for shaping my mind.
And now he's at Duke, but he, along with Rick Hoyle and some graduate students, came up with the general intellectual humility scale. And I loved the items on there. And so these are some things that you could talk about. We just pulled a couple examples, but you can find the full scale in our show notes. But what was your favorite one?
I think my favorite one was so they ask you these questions and you're supposed to rate them like 0 to 5, like how much that applies to you. And mine was, I like finding out new information that is different from what I think is true. I mean, I still can't say I'm a 5 because obviously that sometimes is hard. But it is always intriguing to invest. Like when you have this opinion, you're like, yes, this is right. This is the way it should be. And then you read something. I've seen this a lot with parenting, recently. And I think in some podcasts, I can't remember an example, but it would be like, oh, I thought I was doing the best thing. And look at this. Like, no, they do need to be, involved more in decision making because that creates better minds. And it's like, oh wow, that was completely different from maybe how I was raised or whatnot. And it just changes it. And that kind of excites me a little bit. So I would like to say that in that one, I score higher than intellectual humility.
But I think that's hard for a lot of people, right? When you hear something that goes against what you believe, sometimes people can just shut down or it can make them angry. Or, last week we talked about confirmation bias. So people could just reject it right out. Like that can't be true, right? You find a new piece of data or a research study shows something and you just reject it because you don't want to even think that, this piece of information that goes against what you believe is It's true. So, I know that you tend to enjoy that kind of thing, even if it leads to a little bit of conflict or like, oh, really? Or, but I think a lot of people probably struggle with that.
So, Stacy, which question meant the most to you or did you find intriguing?
So one that I liked that I'll just read here, it says, I recognize the value in opinions that are different from my own. So I really like that one, and not because I necessarily think I'm great at that, right? But something that I would love to be good at, right? Is just to, even when I'm thinking about people's beliefs that are very different from mine, to not only recognize the value in those, but communicate that, that to those people that I value their opinions as well. And one thing that I found really interesting about this, actually, why I picked that item, is because I also came across this study by Duffler, Leary, and Hoyle, where they had participants read controversial statements, so sentences just about controversial issues, and they compared people who scored high on intellectual humility, so people who would say they really value these different opinions and things like that, to people who would score low on this scale. And one interesting finding was that people who score high on intellectual humility spent more time than the people who scored low reading the statements that disagreed with their own beliefs. So spent more time processing things that were going against their beliefs. Whereas when you looked at the items that people agreed with, people who were low and high on intellectual humility looked at them for about the same amount of time. So I thought that was really neat. And kind of indicates, the habits of people who are intellectually humble, that they spend more time researching, studying, thinking about things that go against what they believe. And that seems like a really valuable exercise.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And it also means that when you have this information, that you can become more intellectually humble if you do these things in every day. And when you don't read something and become emotionally aggravated by it or take it personally, that you're like, wonder why they did that or wonder how. And so that's a very interesting, and you can kind of judge that internally. Like when you read something, you're like, I cannot believe they would post that. How dare they? Right. And then you're like, but wonder why. So it's very cool. Part of that study too is when they were polled this amount of people, it's interesting that most everybody feels like they think they're right. Yeah. And it was a staggering. It was 82% of polled individuals think that they're right in their opinions or their belief when they have a disagreement or some type of interaction with a person, more than half the time. Yeah. Only 4%, that's crazy. 4% of the population that they polled thought that they were right less than half the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it kind of makes sense, right? Of course, if you're having a disagreement with someone, you're going to kind of stick to your guns. You're going to argue the point that you think is right. But it's still surprising that people won't even recognize that they could be wrong. 82%, that's high.
Yeah. So that reminds me of, and because it is hard to get into those conversations, but it reminds me of a conversation that we have a lot, where maybe I think I'm right and maybe you're right. Who knows? Let's let the Because We Love You fans decide. But it's kind of like a recurring conversation that we have, and we're often sharing our different viewpoints on it, but it's a real serious issue. Who should pay for your kids' college?
Yeah, this has come up a lot recently, right? Because we have friends who are getting ready to send their kids off to college, and we kind of don't agree.
Stacy, what's your viewpoint?
Well, I work at a college, so certainly I recognize it will be easier for me to do this. But, I would love my kids to graduate with no debt. Yeah. If I could pay for it, I want to.
Okay. So what do you think the benefit is?
Well, I just think watching people who and that wasn't me growing up, to be clear, right? I'm still paying off. I went to school for a very long time, so still paying on a lot of student loan debt.
Dr. Lipowski.
That's probably why, right? Is it though? But yes, I do believe it's worth it. But still paying on a lot of debt. And so maybe that's partially why, I'm still in it. right?
And she turns 40 next year.
Oh gosh. Thank you for the
paying on debt till
reminder.
40.
So exciting. But then I see friends who did not have to pay for college, or, you know, their parents had the means, or, you know, scholarships, whatever, covered everything. And it's just so different when they went to like buy a house, or the things that they were capable of doing before we did. I mean, we spent so many years living off such little money as I was in school, and we were paying on loans and things like that, I mean, I don't... I mean, I would love it if my kids didn't have to experience that. Not that I'm miserable, but, you know, it'd be great.
That. So not that you asked, but
I mean, I'm assuming
she
you're
wanted
going to share. I wanted to
with
hear.
that.
I wanted to hear. That's it. Debate over.
This is how not to be intellectually humble. So I did have to also pay for my school, and I'm still paying for my school right now too. But I feel that it gives me the utmost like responsibility that I went into school knowing that I'm going to pay this astronomical amount, and I'm going to work really hard, but I'm choosing this career. So it gave me, I want my kids to go into something knowing like, this is what's expected. This is how much it is. It's a huge investment. Do you really want it? You know? So I don't want to leave them thinking like, oh yeah, mom and dad are going to pay for it and I can do whatever I want. And I could maybe get a credit card in the meantime and spend money on it too. You know, not that they would, I'm not saying that, but like, I like that. I also, maybe, and not that my parents couldn't necessarily afford it, but I'm sure they could have paid more than nothing. And they helped me. Love you, mom and dad, if you're listening.
Yes, mine too.
But, and I appreciated that, but also they have things that they want to do, and college is a huge expense. So and I totally props to 4-year colleges, liberal arts degree. It totally shaped my brain and my mind. So I'm totally for that. But I just feel like that personal, and there's plenty. Oh, and it's good debt too. I mean, you can take it off of your taxes. So I feel like, and if you don't change the debtor's hands, it goes away when you die. So you don't have to leave it with your kids. So you're not indebting them.
Yes,
so good debt.
Okay.
Them, and so I just really think that perhaps, not that I don't want to help my kids out a lot. I think that they should be responsible for their final years of college. So that's my.
I mean, I see that. And like, certainly I think there are other ways to get our kids to value their education and to value the dollar, right? I really do get your point about helping them see the value in that, right? Like if they're not investing anything in it financially, right? Of course they're investing other things. If they're not investing anything in it financially, it's maybe more difficult to see the value of that.
Yeah. And when you share your points, I definitely identified the one point that really kind of makes me think a little more is the idea that they may have to like postpone a house or postpone like buying different things that starts their family because they have this college loans, because that is a true thing. Like if you have college loans, that counts as your debt to income ratio, and it really can afford that. And I think about what if I help them, that could they be able to start their life. So it does make me think. And even through that, and I have 8 years till I have to make this decision. I still feel pretty strongly about my opinion in this, but I definitely think I might help more. I still think they should have some dollar in the game, that they should have something that they have, like, because I want them to take it seriously, their career choice. But definitely talking with you and some other people that believe in more 100% pay for college. I feel like it has opened my mind to the possibility that there's more negative than that. So
yeah, definitely. And it's just helpful to hear other people's experiences, because of course I have a certain experience about going to college, coming from a first generation family, and being a first gen student is very different than what our kids are going to experience, and the places that maybe they go to school, what they do with that, what their future careers are. I mean, every situation's different. So certainly it's valuable to hear about varied experiences.
Ultimately, I just feel like we need to make college less expensive.
Yes.
Because this is crazy.
Oh, man, those bills are so high.
Investment.
Yeah.
But I think that this illustrates how a lot of our conversations go sometimes. And I think that's one of the reasons I like Stacy so much, is that we don't necessarily agree, but we're able to talk through things and kind of try to see it from a different perspective. And I think it causes us to grow and learn. And that's the value of intellectual humility.
Yeah. And when we were reading there, there's of course a million reasons why intellectual humility is good, but it kind of boiled down to 3 key things. And I think that's the first one, right? Is learning, that you just, that you learn more, you make better decisions. So when college comes around, because we've talked about this for so many years, because we've asked different people's opinions, because we looked up different things about loans and taxes and all of that, we're going to make a better decision when it comes to who's taking out what loans and how much money are we just paying out of pocket, and how, us looking for resources to cover more of those, tuition and room and board bills. So yeah, I mean, ultimately it's just making us better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just acknowledging that I don't know everything there is about college. You don't either. And how do we learn the most? So yeah, I love that. I also love that it helps better relationships.
For sure.
I think it's like ignorant to think that. I mean, that's what's important. When you think about life and you think about believing one thing or another, that's not, but it's the friends, it's the encouragement, it's the love that we care, it's kindness. And that's something that we can all do, even if we disagree with how they parent, or how what foods they eat, or how they don't exercise, like whatever your opinions are. It still comes down to better relationships are formed when we see that, oh, you could see this from a different perspective.
Yeah, I'm not always right. There's value in your opinion and your experiences. That absolutely makes those relationships better. And even beyond like just the confines of actual relationships with family and friends, I think just the interactions that we have with other people out in the world become better. This can be coworkers, this could be strangers, this can be the person sitting next to you on the bus, that those interactions become more pleasant, more encouraging, kinder, more respectful when we're both just open to hearing what the other person thinks and recognizing that I don't know everything and I'm not right necessarily about everything.
I love that, because I had an interaction with someone recently and they had a different idea about how something should go.
Yeah.
And a little bit initially it was like, oh, I've already thought through that. I've thought through all the issues. No, that's not going to work. And that's kind of like my initial gut. And I wanted to kind of like text it out because it was over text. And then I realized, like, we weren't even preparing this yet, but I was like, that was kind of like, I know it all. Like, I know how this is supposed to go. And I tend to do it more with my husband and maybe even you sometimes, but I'm trying to be better in everyday life. So I thought about it and I'm like, well, let's see if this will work. Yeah. So we engaged it and we had a discussion about it. Will this idea work? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the things that are going to come up? And then we came up with what the best idea was. And it even happened to be my initial thought. But the idea that I was open to it, that we had a discussion about it, that didn't break our relationship. And it held a mutual respect. And so that's what I learned from that, is that in everything, it's not that necessarily your idea still might be the best idea. Your opinion might still be the best opinion. And this is with coworkers but the idea that you even allow that time for investigation says, oh, she cares and she just wants to do the best thing. And because she cares and she wants to do the best thing and she's open to my opinion. And now we see that, okay, it still was that. The relationship was kept. And it was like a beautiful reminder of like, and I think that's huge with leadership. I mean, it's like when you feel like a leader does that, then so if we want to become better leaders, we've got to be better at relationships and better at hearing what people are saying.
Yeah, that's good. And it reminds me of the TED Talk that we listened to this week by Farah Nasser. And she's a journalist, and she talked about a similar experience like you're bringing up, where she invited a colleague to lunch because it seemed like they were always disagreeing, had different perspectives, and got to hear his, perspective about the stories they were writing and how he was feeling and how valuable that was. But what I really liked from her talk, one thing that, I pulled, was this idea that people tend to recognize that, we spend a lot of time with family and friends. That's one thing she said. Like, I think COVID did that. The pandemic did that. We've been together more with our people, but that also means that we're with other people less. A lot of people are working from home, so they're not with their coworkers as much. A lot of people, stay home more and don't interact with strangers, and kind of it just changed the way that we interact with other people, I think. And the idea that when we do that, we kind of create these circles where we're spending time with people who think like we do, believe like we do, share our opinions, because our close circle tends to be a lot like us, right? And we all tend to, at that same time, though, believe that other people are living in echo chambers like that. Like, I can recognize in others that they're spending most of their time with people that think like them and believe like them, but we can't recognize it in ourselves. So it's another one of those biases we have, that, like, we can say, oh, it's because you're just hanging out with these people and listening to this media station and following these people on social media, but we don't recognize it in our own patterns. We think that we are better at that than other people. And the truth is that probably most of us are not.
Yeah. And that can be very toxic to our growth.
For sure.
And that's going to be very limiting, and it should be very convicting, and to take a look and say, and how many conversations have I had this week that somebody actually believed a little bit different than me, had an opinion that was a little bit different than mine, and how did that conversation go? And so if we know that we naturally do this, it's going to take an effort. It's going to take effort to break this mold. It's going to take some and it's going to be a little bit out of our comfort zone to say, oh, this person's not like me, and how, because you have to have that empathy for them, that their response is going to be different, but they're still human. They still have a brain. They still have these experiences. But I love that, the goal of not only being around people that support your beliefs, but that cause your that challenge your beliefs. Isn't that? I mean, it's a little bit fun to me.
I know you enjoy it more than others,
it's like it's like a breath of fresh air. But
Yeah, but I think we have to think about practical steps, because we can say this is so valuable and this is what you should do and you should be intellectually humble, but how do we actually become someone who is intellectually humble? And I think that our guidance comes from this article that we read in this high impact journal called Nature. And they have this model of intellectual humility, and it kind of revolved around three things. And I think that these are three practical things that we can do to be better at this. So the first one was just simply recognizing the limits of our knowledge, that we are fallible, that we make mistakes, that we're not perfect. Just recognizing that, because it's not easy and we don't like to admit it.
So if you're sitting there right now and you think you know all the things.
Yes. You don't know all the things.
You don't. And that's sometimes hard, especially like if you're an expert or you spend a lot of years studying.
That's right.
But even when we were preparing, I was thinking about Stacy. I mean, she knows a lot of things. I know a lot of things about medicine, but there's no way to know all the things.
Yep.
And so to always know that there's something new out there, there's something different. Early on in my career, like somebody would like bring up a medicine or a treatment plan, and I would just like be sweating. I'm like, I don't know it. Now I can embrace it more. I'm like, well, there's only about 100,000 things new coming out a day.
Right.
So no, I don't know of that weird little pill that did this one time in Japan that's not here in America yet. Yeah. Because people are constantly coming, but it's just, it should be a breath of fresh air. Like to me, it's like, I'm not supposed to know everything.
Yeah. You can't know everything. We don't know everything. You can't, and that's okay. Right?
Even if you think you're an expert, you still don't know everything. And I think, like from reading, a lot of the most successful people that they mentioned in some of the TED Talks were like Warren Buffett and things like this. And the cool thing about them was that that's how they lead. They're always constantly learning.
Yeah.
They're constantly listening to other people's podcasts and stuff. And I think if we're going to be successful, we got to know we don't know it all and look to people and how do we learn from others?
Yeah. And I think that's a second step is truly valuing other people's beliefs, because we could say that like, oh yeah, of course I value what you say. But how often do we really care and really want to hear about and value the perspectives of people that are not like us and think a different way and are sometimes off-putting to us? I'm totally guilty of this. Just shut down the people who believe it's something extreme, totally on the other side of an issue, right?
Yeah.
Like, unfriend, I
do.
can't hear it. I don't want to hear it. It's easy to do, but
I often want to shut down people who don't value La Fiesta after church on Sunday for lunch.
Yeah, you Mi Pueblo crowd.
I'm like,
we're coming for you.
I can't identify. I can't identify with them. But that's an easy way. But we really do. And part of Fair, when she was talking, I thought it was interesting. So she picked the guy that was totally opposite of her, that believed totally different, that there had been some just kind of bad blood between them. But at the end, when she closed with the TED Talk, she actually said, through these lunches, through this journalistic, like, I want to know why you are like this, they connected. And he actually helped her write the TED Talk.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So what I loved from that is by them valuing each other, then they were able to gain value together. And it was beautiful. And I think that like we miss out so many times on people that can really add a lot of value to our life because we think we put them in a group, or we say that they're a certain way, or that we exclude them because they're like, oh, our values would not line up, when maybe they're the person that could be the catalyst to some of the greatness and some of the great discussions. So
yeah, that's good. And I think, you're alluding to the last step, which is actually, showing people through behavior that we value their opinions. And I know one that we were talking about this morning, you were telling me just a really great story from work, but, is validating other people's opinions, their experiences, their emotions, doing that in the way that we interact with them in conversation, but also, explicitly in what we say to them when they share their experiences with us.
Yeah. I like, I have two statements that sometimes I'll use as like, I see how you could feel that way because maybe you can't. Yeah. Maybe that is totally not what, but when you say, I see, I understand, I can see where you come from, that really like strikes a chord with them. And you're not doing this to manipulate but you're saying like, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry that you came from this position, and I know that can make you feel that way, but you're saying it's okay for you to feel that way. But then sometimes you have to turn and say, but this is how I feel too. And then when you both say, oh, but I could see how your experiences would make you feel that way.
Right.
We've alluded to this twice, so I'm going to just go ahead and tell you the story. But the Farrah story, where there was a white middle-aged man and she was a woman of color, and they were both in the same group. And he actually came to her and said, I feel like a minority. And so her initial response is
shock and awe. Like, how can you say that to me?
What mess are you talking about?
Yeah.
But when she sat back and talked to him, she realized that they did happen to be in more of an environment that was supporting the agenda, like that agenda,
her values and beliefs, and political beliefs. Yeah.
And so therefore, because she has been a minority her whole life and had really identified with that, she could see that in that situation, he could be, even though she didn't agree with it.
Right.
And she didn't agree with it, but she said, I could see where you are the only person who holds these values,
sitting in that room,
beliefs in this room, and you could feel that way. And there's such, there's such power. There's power in validating people's feelings.
Absolutely.
So I love this, and I've gained so much, and I hope that we can continue. Call me out on my absent intellectual humility.
Yes, me too. I mean, this is just something I really want to strive towards, is just always becoming more intellectually humble, just recognizing what I don't know and valuing what other people do know and their experiences and thoughts. And I think that's how you get to world peace. Yeah?
Yeah. I wish that, we should be teaching this class in the Pentagon or some type of seat, because they need it. Just, let's see where
so call us. We'll come.
Yes. And we'll get out of this dungeon.
Yes.
That smells like must.
May not look like it, but it's pretty smelly down here.
I love the smell. It's very reminiscent. But we do all of this. We have these talks. We hope that you were able to eat some good food today that fed your mind. We hope that your mind is steaming and ready to move and doing all the fun things. And we do all of this, Stacy,
because we love you.